Swiftblood, hi. Ray, awesome. I'm a little late. Dave handed me a chicken sandwich like right before. So I was like, I'm gonna eat this really quick. It took longer than I thought. So apologies, a tiny little bit late. I was concerned. Oh, I'm so sorry to worry you. No, it was a chicken sandwich. I got held up. We're on Florida time. Also, thank you for the shirt compliment. I'm in my Halloween gear. Dave likes this outfit because I have suspenders. Yeah, and I hadn't eaten today, so I was like, that's probably a good idea, right? And I cleaned a bunch today, so I was like, well, I should probably eat. Yeah. I ate today, it's the responsible thing. I'm hydrating 3.75 hours later than usual. Ugh. Thank you. I'm wearing them out of... it's required. I scratched my eye somehow, and it's really red. You can kind of see it. I don't know if you can see it. Anyway, sorry if anybody has eye stuff. I didn't touch my eye, but contacts are really uncomfortable right now. So, yeah, we're in glasses time. Not something I usually like to do. So, and these are old, so they just don't always fit right. That's wild. I just had a friend who scratched his cornea just this afternoon. I don't think it's too rough. Like, I don't think I need to go see like a doctor or anything about it. I think it's I don't know. I don't even really know when it happened. So yeah, I suppose so. But it doesn't really hurt. I can't really feel it unless I put contacts in. So I think it's, and I think I know how it happened. I was washing my hair the other day and I got conditioner in my eye, and I had, like effectively like blind. So I was trying to wipe it out, and I think I scratched it while I was trying to like clear it out, and that's how I did it, because it hurt bad when I did it, and then I didn't feel anything, and then I kind of thought everything was chill. It just kind of burned for a while because there was conditioner in it. And then the next morning when I went to put my contacts in, I was like, ow, like why did that hurt? And I didn't even notice the redness until after I had my contacts in, and I went to go take my contacts out, and I pulled the lid down, and I was like, oh, what is that? And it's only on that eye. And so really I think it's just I scratched my eyeball. So now we're stuck with glasses until further notice. I don't know how long it'll take to at least not feel discomfort anymore, but I don't generally like wearing my glasses. I don't think I have done... At least it wasn't super glue in my eye? I don't even know how that would happen. I feel like you would have to do... See, I feel that the only reason you would say that is if there was somebody who had gotten super glue in their eye. I've done that before during work with an eyelash or a piece of dust. Okay, you just mean you got dust in your eye or an eyelash in your eye. Not super glue, right? Don't store your eye drops in the same area as the glue. Who is doing that? Why would that be a good story? Because I'll tell you, I don't have the best organization, but what I consider a safe place for eye drops is I keep one in the bathroom and one in the center console in my car. And I can't think of a scenario where you would have super glue in your bathroom or in your car, really. I've never needed. No, I didn't see it. And let me scroll back. What? No way. I can't find it. What do you mean? I'm going so far back. What previous comment? I guess I didn't see it. I can't find it. Super glue. Maybe. Because I can't find it. I just don't know how that would happen. I mean, I guess if you... I would need some context. I can imagine it working a cosplay thing, so you've got glue for props. But why would that be near your eyes? I had a friend opening super glue. Oh! I've never had it squirt out at me that aggressively. That sounds terrible. If super glue like pressurized squirted into my eye, I think I would just quite possibly. That sounds awful. I've used super glue in my bathroom before working up. I've never worked on props in my bathroom unless the props, like whatever was needed, would be commonly located in the bathroom. I guess. And even wigs I normally work on in this room. See, that's how I can imagine it happening. I showed up to Glue Horror Stories. Yeah, you're just in time. I'm a little late, so we're still talking about whatever we feel like. And I scratched my eye, and Lady Eva just got through telling us a terrible story about how their friend got super glue that squirted into their eye while they were opening it. And now we're talking about super gluing your eye shut. That wasn't even my friend's worst injury at our first apartment. Your friend sounds accident prone. Also, I just got some wig glue and it looks very much like eye drops. Normally when I've gotten wig glue, it does kind of come in a little... The only thing is that it's commonly like larger than my eye drops. My friend was stupidity prone. See, I just can't imagine a scenario where I would be looking down the barrel of a super glue tube. I've just never opened super glue that way. I always turn it away from me or to the side. It wouldn't have been my worst injury either. I don't know, I've never severely hurt myself or super glued any part of myself that would be intensely painful to have super glued, I guess. I've gotten it on my fingers before. Isn't there a warning that says to point it away from yourself when opening? Quite possibly. I can't say I've ever read the outside of a super glue bottle that intently before, but there might be. I can't speak to that. I have no experience about that. Although Dave has several super glue tubes, we can find out right now. I would just have to finagle my way off this futon. The amount of people I know with super glue injuries is high. To a tattoo machine? Like the person who put Dobby staples on with super glue. I never put them on with super glue. I always put them on with drying liquid latex. Because you can hook it through. You wait until it's tacky and malleable, and then you just sort of like hook it. And then you press it down, and then you continue to let it dry. Take a hairdryer to it. That's what I always did. Seems safer. Seems like a bad idea to try and super glue those on. I could see how if you were getting extremely frustrated with results by any other method, how it would drive you to that, but you would have to know beforehand that it's not going to go great removing them later. Yeah, no, it's not great as wig glue. It was the flat ones, and he didn't have anything else and didn't want to cosplay. Oh no. I could see how you would do that. I don't think it's a great idea. But it's not unheard of, I suppose. I wouldn't advocate for it. I'd rather wait and get the right materials and spend a little bit more money than to injure myself or destroy something else in the process. And that's why I don't cosplay as often as I should. Because I don't always have the materials. Number 1819, the Dami Clay. That's a little old to be making those mistakes. Not gonna lie, I feel as someone in their 30s. I should cosplay Dobby again, though. I still have all my staples that I made for those. I made them to be little hooks so I could reuse them. I have a water and an apple juice. I contemplated making the apple juice into a smoothie and ended up not having time. So it's just regular juice. It's not special juice. You have water. Good, we gotta get going. We gotta get going. I keep forgetting that I started late. I have nothing yet. It's also because, like, it still feels too early a lot of the time, because the sun doesn't even set until... So it just feels like it's not time yet until it's late, and then I'm late. So... Oh, Ray has nothing to drink. You gotta hydrate. You gotta hydrate, Ray. My light setup is different today because I have glasses on. I can't turn the ring light on. Hydrate or die. Anyway, we didn't read last week because we all got sidetracked, so we gotta do some stuff today. I'm a little worried because I ate right before this and I got a lot of crazy stuff to do. Got a lot of crazy stuff I need to do. Oh no. Hopefully you'll make it through. But if you haven't been here before, this isn't a normal live where I sit here and talk to you the entire time. Because I don't always have something interesting to say. So This is a book club, and each week I read a little bit more of a book series to you. And right now we are working our way through Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children. We are on the last and final installment, The Desolations of Devil's Acre. Now, if you haven't read it before, you can always go to my YouTube and find the rest of the installments there of all the previous books, and also everything that has led up to this moment where we are picking up at chapter 11. Now, if you weren't here the week before last, because we didn't do anything last week, because we actually did end up talking the entire time, which is amazing. I don't normally have all that much to say. We're kind of going through some stuff right now. The Imbrants are working hard to set the Peculiar Society in Devil's Acre at ease. Unfortunately, it's a little tough because Call's back and he's got some great new powers of manifestation. He's not really there. He just keeps making holograms, scaring everybody, spreading propaganda, which may or may not be true. Raining bones. It's doing a whole lot of stuff. And lately, a Hologast showed up, and not even a normal Hologast. Everyone could see this one. Normally, only Jacob can, and Jacob can normally control them. And instead, this one could control Jacob, which he conveniently has not told anyone about. Because why would you? Anyway. We scroll hard. I don't know how much we'll get through today, because this first chapter has a considerable amount of pictures, and it's rather short, so we might get through, but 12 is a little bit longer. I think we'll get through both. We might be able to get through both. Depends on how well my voice holds up, because I gotta do a lot of crazy stuff. So, who is ready to go ahead and pick up at chapter 11? Are we all good to go? Twos in chat. Two. Excellent. Okay. Where's my book ring? This book's not too fat for the book ring. Nora and I spent the rest of the day in an anxious orbit between the Ministries building, where the Imbrans were holding their emergency meeting and might emerge any minute to weave their temporal shield around the acre, and Ditch House, where Millard and Perplexus were puzzling over loop maps at the kitchen table, working out the location of Miss Turn's loop and every possible route to reach it. We'd been told to pack, but how could we when we didn't know what kind of territory we'd be traveling through? When we were at the house, we tried not to hover over Millard's shoulder, but failed often enough that Perplexus finally drew a line on the floor with a grease pencil and told us to keep behind it. The only one allowed to cross it was Perplexus's assistant, Matthew, a humorless boy who carried a bamboo stick for pointing at maps and who kept his mentor supplied with steaming pots of smoky Russian tea, the only liquid Perplexus would let pass his lips besides espresso. The goal, Millard explained while Perplexus took one of his frequent tea breaks, was to plot a quick but safe route to Miss Turn's loop. Quick meant a day or two, but so far the only one they had discovered involved traveling overland from Mongolia to France via 1917, a perilous 2-week journey on horses, camels, and trains. Though Nora and I, and whoever journeyed with us, would have a reasonable chance of surviving the trip, there was skepticism as to whether Devil's Acre could survive a siege by Call and his forces for that long. So, the cartographers continued puzzling and sent us away because our hovering was making them anxious. Also, here's Matthew. It's spelled weird. It's not even spelled like that. It's spelled crazy. Elsewhere in the acre, Sharon was overseeing the strengthening of our meager defenses. The Hologast intrusion had convinced everyone that the Home Guard was far from adequate, and there was no telling how long the Imbrans would need to create their shield. A second harpoon gun was found, and both were positioned near the loop entrance. New barbed wire fences and guard stations had been built around the prison, and Parkins Californios volunteered to supplement the guards already monitoring our population of white prisoners who had been suspiciously quiet the last few days. Dozens of peculiars lined up outside the Shrunken Head to volunteer for the new Devil's Acre Defense Corps, with a surprising number of Americans joining them. Those with combat-relevant abilities were assigned to patrols that would keep watch over the loop entrance as well as Bentham's house, though the Panloopticon was now officially powered down, doors locked. All privately owned telescopes and binoculars were requisitioned for use by the Defense Corps to be distributed to sentries who were installed on rooftops and balconies around the acre. Leonora Haymaker, who could see in the dark and have vision stronger than any telescope, agreed to sit in her window and simply stare down the length of Doleful Street for as many hours a day as she could tolerate. Everyone who had a personal firearm was to keep it with them at all times. Many of the Americans already did this, but since the Hologast attack, they'd taken their attachment a step further, refusing to unstrap their holsters for meals or trips to the restroom. Earlier in the day, one of Parkins California's had even been discovered napping, snoring loudly, in fact, with 2 cocked and loaded guns on his lap and an enormous knife gripped in his hand. Sharon warned the volunteers that their lives would be at risk, but after this morning's brush with tragedy, no one was under any illusions to the contrary. Their lives were at risk. Whether they volunteered or not. A few tried to discourage the youngest peculiars from taking part in the acre's defense, but a young boy from Miss Grackle's theater troupe jumped up on a pillar by the pub and gave an impassioned speech about how all of our lives were forfeit if Call broke through our defenses, and it was a nobler thing to risk death in defense of our loop than to give it up in defeat, which earned him a massive round of applause. Lamoth's northern clan would be positioned strategically around the loop entrance. Leo's goons had proved themselves cowards and were nowhere to be found, but the leaders of his 3 undergangs, Wreck Donovan, Angelica, and even Dogface and his untouchables, lined up to join the Defense Corps. When I looked surprised to see them there, they shrugged it off as nothing more than self-interest. But I was starting to think they weren't as mercenary as they let on. Finally, just before nightfall, Francesca's voice came over the loudspeakers. The shield was ready to be created, she announced, and anyone who wanted to be present for its weaving should proceed immediately to the loop entrance. The entire loop flooded into the streets. And now we got some pictures. just a bunch of Americans hanging out with guns. No. They called it the quilt, and the Imbrans thought it would instill some small measure of peace in us to watch it being sewn together, to see for ourselves that it was real. We gathered near the loop entrance, along the banks of the ditch where it disappeared into the tunnel. Torches and gas lamps cast a flickering glow over the crowd. Spectators 100 strong on one side of the water, a tight circle of 12 Imbrans on the other, hands linked. My friends and I all stood together. Guards watched over everything from the top of the bridge tunnel, and the two who'd been assigned to watch Nora and me stood nearby, scanning the crowd for threats. As many times as we'd evaded them, they still took their jobs seriously. Across the ditch, the Imbrans began to sing an old peculiar and walked slowly in a circle. Also, there's another picture I forgot. Hold on. Sorry. Like I said, there are a lot of pictures in this one. Hope they don't collapse the loop by accident, Enoch whispered to a pretty curly-haired girl standing beside him in the crowd, and she looked so alarmed Enoch had to reassure her that he was kidding. Horace shushed him. "This is no time to joke around. If this doesn't work, we're all in trouble." "What's deadly is how boring you are. If I wasn't here to lighten the mood now and then, everyone would hang themselves years ago." Horace scowled. "If you could see the future, you wouldn't be laughing." "Hush, both of you," hissed Millard, and I hadn't realized he was standing nearby. "Shouldn't you be off squinting at maps?" Enoch said. "We're close to a breakthrough, I think, and I wasn't about to miss this." The Imbrans began singing louder and spinning faster, their long dresses fluttering in the air. A green light began to glow from the center of their circle. Some in the crowd gasped. The Imbrans sang louder, spun faster. The light grew brighter. "Here it comes," I heard Millard say, and Nor, standing next to me, pressed herself to my side. The light brightened again and expanded upward. The Imbrans' song crescendoed in a high, wavering note that held, and then, all at once, and with a sound like a thunderclap, they leapt into the air and assumed their avian forms. A collective gasp went up from the crowd. The Imbrans maintained their formation, flying now instead of running, but its diameter grew wider and wider. And with it, the pulsing green light. They were working it, pulling it like taffy. Then they flew up into the sky. Miss Avocet first, Miss Peregrine last, the others in formation between them, the green light stretching and following. They turned a loop in the air above us, then swooped down and disappeared into the darkness of the bridge tunnel. The green glow that followed them lit the tunnel briefly and brilliantly, then was gone with the Imbrans. There was a brief period of silence, 5 seconds that stretched to 10. Murmurs of worry rippled through the crowd. Where had they gone? Were they coming back? Was it over? Then a green light winked into view at the edge of the dark horizon. It began to draw itself across the sky like a shimmering blanket, a too bright aurora borealis, and as it spread from one corner of the heavens to the other, veins of electric white light crackled through it. Once it had filled the sky, casting a subtle green glow over everything. A noise like a train approaching sounded from the tunnel. After a few seconds, the Embrons flew out of it again in a tight cluster, pulling behind them a net of green, almost too bright to look at. It permeated the tunnel, but went no farther, creating a semi-translucent wall. The Embrons did one last circle over our heads, an encouraging victory flourish, then flew off in the direction of their council chamber, pulling the crackling green net with them until it covered the whole sky. The crowd buzzed with excitement. "Never seen anything like it," the girl beside Enoch said. "3 cheers for our birds," Claire cried, punching the air with her fist. "I'd like to see nasty old Cole try and get through that." "Certainly was impressive," Horace enthused. "It's just some green light," Enoch said. "I just hope it works," I said. "It will," said Claire. A guard with a bullhorn reminded us it was past curfew and began herding us back to our beds. "What do you think?" Nora said to me as the crowd started to move. "Are we safe for a while?" I glanced at the moonlit clouds above us, glowing pale green behind the Embrons' quilt, and wondered how much of it was for show. "For a while, I think. Not forever." We hadn't gone 50 feet when something crackled like static above our heads, and the crowd, which had been shuffling along calmly, stopped and looked up. Looming overhead was a face, giant and rendered in blue. "Very impressive. Quite the display. Very impressive," he boomed. Call, or the holographic version of him, had returned to mock us. The timing was precise. He had come to undermine our sense of security just as the Embrons were building it up. "He can't hurt you. Don't panic," someone shouted, but it was too late. And this time, we weren't trapped in a packed auditorium. Everybody scrambled for cover. The stampede knocked me into Nor, and we both fell to the ground. But before we could be crushed, Bronwyn heaved us over her shoulder with Claire and Olive. Call wailed, "Oh, what shall I do? Whatever shall I do? Let me in, let me in! I'm stymied, flummoxed, perplexed." A volley of gunshots rang out, but it was just the Americans shooting at Call's image. Their bullets peppered the field of green overhead and got stuck, frozen in the air like a swarm of bees. The crowd was fleeing in a dozen directions, diving into nearby buildings and running for distant parts of the acre. Bronwyn appeared to be following our friends back toward the house, but Call's sneering face and shrill voice followed us wherever we went, omnipresent. "I'm only joking, of course. I relish a challenge, though it won't be much of one." His voice sounded like it was right in my ear. "I would expect nothing less from my dear sister and her whelps. We haven't come to see you yet, incidentally, because we're just getting warmed up, stretching our just-born limbs." An image of a monstrous blue-veined tree branch shot across the sky, then dissipated in sparks. We. Who is we, you ask? I do have friends, you know. Here they are now, in a loop you might recognize. Call's face disappeared, and in its place, a terrifying scene was projected against the green sky. I watched it, transfixed, while Bronwyn ran. Two monstrous creatures menaced a house as children fled screaming. Towering above the roof, one creature had a head shaped like an eel and black leathery wings sprouting from its back. It tore at the house with claw-like hands, peeling back pieces of the roof and tossing them into the air. The other looked like an amalgamation of steaming tar in a roughly human form. It shambled into a cow tied to a post, passed through it, and the cow melted into a flaming puddle. The eel-headed thing bent down on one knee and scooped up a fleeing child in its wing, then went on destroying the house. "That's Miss Egret's loop," I heard Emma say, running behind us. Call's voice narrated over the scene. "I am a god now, and these are my angels. You cannot keep us out. You cannot keep us from what is rightfully ours. And we have such gifts to bestow upon you, if only you'd let us. Renounce your false mothers. Give up your embryons. Reclaim your dignity, your freedom." The image in the sky changed back to Cole's face as he broke into a strident, speechifying tone. "Freedom from loops, from the constraints of time that the bird women have used to imprison you all these years. Yes, prison, 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 that's all most of you have known. Join me, and I will free you, my children." Threats and promises, manipulation and misinformation, Cole's signature style. He disappeared finally in a spray of blue light, and then something was snowing down on us. Some new desolation. We were nearly back to the house. I realized that what was falling were papers, and something was printed on them. We made it to the front stoop of Ditch House, where our other friends were waiting. Panting, Bronwyn eased us off her back and set us down. The papers had begun to cover the ground. "Is he gone?" Claire cried. "Are we safe yet?" "He was never here," said Emma. "That was another of his transmissions." "If he wasn't here, how'd he make it rain newspapers?" "Same way he made it rain ash and ankle bones," said Enoch. A shaky voice rang out over the acre's many loudspeakers. "This is Miss Esmeralda Everset. Everyone remain calm and return to your rooms. The quilt is fully operational now, and Cole cannot reach us. Neither can any of his hologuest. He's only trying to scare you." There was a scratchy sound and a brief whine of feedback, and then Miss Avocet came back to the microphone, sounding flustered. "And don't touch those papers. They're nothing but proper—" There was a staticky and the loudspeakers went quiet. A breeze picked up and blew the papers in drifts around our feet. "Proper what?" Hugh said and bent to pick one up. Bronwyn snatched at it. "Hugh, don't!" But he dodged her. "Propaganda," I said, picking up one for myself. "God, look at this." It was a page of newspaper. Olive and Nora looked on as I turned it right side up. Across the top, a headline screamed, "Two-faced Imbrins promise loop freedom to clan leaders in secret deal." I looked up to see other peculiars on the street around us also reading it. "There's more," Emma said, tilting her face closer to the paper. Below the headline was an article, if you could call it that. "What's it say?" Bronwyn asked, then looked sheepish. "I'm a slow reader." Emma scanned the text and summarized. "It claims let's see here, that the Imbrans told Lamoth, Parkins, and Leo Burnham that they would give them all loop freedom in exchange for a signed peace deal. But only them and no one else. And then Emma grimaced and shook her head. The rest is just ranting on about how the Imbrans are traitors and want to keep us all subservient and loop-trapped, etc.
Would they really do that?
Olive said. She looked hurt by the very suggestion.
They wouldn't, would they?
Of course not, Claire said, agitated. Just the other day, Miss Peregrine told us they still hadn't figured out how to make the reset reaction safe. Emma balled the paper angrily and pitched it away. It's all lies. Consider the source. I don't know, Hugh said. It was a bit strange how all the clans suddenly agreed to peace and even helped us at Gravehill. It wasn't exactly sudden, Horace said. They'd been negotiating for weeks. Noor nodded. And how they got Leo to forgive me. Or whatever, even after feeling so insulted. That's not strange, it's self-interest, Emma said. They realized the whites were a threat to their people too, and that we needed to work together to beat them. That sounds reasonable, I said, and I'd agree with you. If anything the clans ever did was reasonable. Who cares if the Imbrans did make an offer? Said Enoch, and we turned to see him walking toward us with one of the papers in his hand. It got us what we needed, peace and a partnership.
We care because it would have meant they lied,
Olive said.
That all the times they told the people who want loop freedom that it wasn't possible or wasn't safe yet, that wasn't true.
Enoch shrugged. So? We've got it. And that's all I really care about.
Imbrans don't lie,
shouted a red-faced Claire.
All right, we heard you.
Loudness isn't an effective argumentation tactic, said Emma.
Yes, it is.
The door to the house creaked open, and Fiona came out in a robe. She gave us a sleepy smile and a wave, then cast a concerned look around at all the papers on the ground and the strange new green cast to the sky. She was still recovering from the strain of our Hologuest encounter and had slept through everything. It's easy to forget what freedom means when you already have it, Hugh said, and he shot a glare at Enoch, bounded up the front steps to join Fiona, and disappeared into the house with her. What climbed up his craw and died, Enoch said. Not all of us are free, remember? Emma said. Fiona's still loop-trapped. Enoch frowned. Right. But how do you know the Imbrans weren't lying to the clan leaders about giving them loop freedom? Noor asked. Because they're... I started to reply, but cut myself short as a patrol of Americans led by Lamoth marched by. Lamoth looked furious and had one of the papers balled in his fist. A few of his coat raccoons glared at us in passing. Because they were out of range, I whispered, because they're still here. The two home guards assigned to Noor and I came striding toward us. There you are, the taller one huffed. You mustn't leave us behind anymore. The Imbrans want to see you in their chambers at once, said the other. Just then, a paper fluttered past my face and smacked flat against the wall of the house, pinned there as if by a gust, though I hadn't felt even a puff of breeze. It was a poster with the faces of all the Imbran council members in a row like a police lineup, the word guilty stamped across each one. Olive said,
More prop...
Oh, shut up, barked Emma. She went to rip down the poster, but it slid up the wall away from her before she could nab it, then off to one side when she tried again. She leapt at it and finally managed to tear it down, then ignited it in her hands. But as soon as she crumpled and tossed away the burning paper, 5 more just like it blew in and slapped against the wall all around her. She let out a cry of frustration and turned to face the guards.
"We're all going to see the Embrins. I need to know what's going on."
And that is the end of chapter 11. How many pages are in chapter 12? 239, 225. So it's about 14. 14? Yeah, I think we can get through it. I think we could do it. We started, 8:30? I got through 10 in 30 minutes. We do 14 more. I think I'm fine. I think my voice is fine. I say overconfidently. All right. Chapter 12. I only say that because every time I'm like, I'm doing all right. And then by 8 chapters in, my voice starts to go and I'm like, As we hurried to keep up with the long strides of the guards, the Embrins' faces followed us. Every few seconds, another guilty poster flew in, as if on some magical breeze, to paper a nearby wall or lamppost. Guilty, 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 like a drumbeat. I could see it all happening all over. Posters were chasing people down the street, smacking people in the head. Not all of us had come. Claire had refused to be a part of what seemed like a confrontation of the Embrins. Hugh had joined Fiona, still resting in the house. Horace was clearly exhausted by the events of the day, but also said our cause would be better served by him taking a sleeping dram and going to bed in the hopes that he might have some useful prophetic dreams. At the ministry's building, a small but rowdy crowd swarmed the cobblestone forecourt. They were waving the papers and demanding to be let in, while a phalanx of guards prevented them from reaching the massive iron doors. But they let my friends and me right through.
"I want to know what this means," a woman shouted as she brandished the paper. "If it's true, I'm going to—" "What?" said Emma, aiming a flaming finger at the woman's nose. "Overthrow the Embrins? Go out there and surrender to Call?" Before the woman could respond, a red-faced man shoved her out of the way. "You!" he shouted, a jet of literal steam coming out of his ears. "Tell your birds to get out here and talk to us. We deserve to know what's going on." Enoch rounded on him. "They're working themselves to death trying to save us from Call. That's what's going on." Emma gaped at him in surprise. "Let's not stop and argue with every hothead in the acre," I said, and pushed both of them up the steps toward the iron doors, which heaved open with a great squeaking complaint. "Haven't you got bigger things to worry about?" Enoch shouted over his shoulder as we slipped inside. "Ungrateful slobs!" The doors thundered closed. Enoch slapped the wall in anger. "Why, Enoch, I didn't know you cared what people thought of the birds," said Emma. "I don't," he said, embarrassed and rubbing his hand. "So it's fine if you talk rubbish about the birds," Olive said with a grin. "But if anyone else dares to—" "I don't want to talk about it," he grumbled and followed the waiting guards. We were escorted through the cavernous entrance hall, empty but for a few office workers,
Its service windows shuttered. Then down a long, gloomy passage to the Imbrin Council chamber, where another pair of guards was posted outside. A sign tacked above the big wooden door read, "Quiet, please." "Yes to them," one of the guards said, nodding at Nor and me. "No to the others." "I'm not going if they don't," I said. "None of you then." "Bollocks to that," Enoch said, and then he bellowed, "Miss Peregrine, it's Enoch! Let us in!" The guards began dragging Enoch down the hall while he thrashed and swore. Then the chamber door flew open and Miss Peregrine appeared.
"Good heavens, Mr. Collins, just let them in."
The guard looked flustered. "But you said—"
"Never mind that. Let them in, Mr. O'Connor too, as long as he promises to behave."
Enoch was released and strode quickly back, brushing off his vest and casting obscene gestures at the guards, who, from their looks of it, were imagining cracking him in the head with their batons. Miss Peregrine warned us all to be quiet, and we followed her inside the high-ceilinged chamber room. I had never seen the long conference table full before. 12 Imbrins were huddled around it in postures of worry and concentration. Miss Cuckoo, Miss Wren, Miss Babax, Miss Blackbird, and others who, being in the presence of senior Imbrins, were unusually quiet. Miss Avocet sat at the head of the table, presiding from her wheelchair. She raised a hand toward us.
"Mr. Portman, Miss Pradesh, please come join us. This concerns you two, or it will soon enough."
Miss Peregrine put her hand on our backs and guided us to the table. We stood. There were no more chairs. I felt something nudge my foot and looked down to see Addison beneath the table. I whispered hi and he mouthed hello. Like us, he was not quite of a rank to be at the table, but as Miss Wren's trusted aide-de-camp, he was at least allowed under it. At the edge of the room, Emma and Enoch had come with only one thing in mind, the story about the American clan leaders, but seeing so many Imbrins in the midst of serious discussion seemed to have dampened their appetite for confrontation, at least temporarily.
"If your words are perfectly comfortable, Alma, I will resume."
Miss Cuckoo huffed. She wore a military-style greatcoat with gold stripes along the cuffs and held in her hand a thin, long-handled stick with a bit of red chalk at the end. Miss Avocet might have been nominally in charge, but Miss Cuckoo seemed to have been elected battle strategist. She and Miss Peregrine gazed intently at the table, where spread upon the polished wood was an oversized loop map of Greater London.
"Cole means to surround us," Miss Peregrine intoned gravely, "and I have no doubt he will."
Miss Cuckoo rapped her chalk stick on Devil's Acre. Its boundary was marked by a meandering green line, roughly square, near the center of the map. The acre had become so central to my life that in my imagination it filled most of London, and it was a shock to see it rendered as a small and insignificant speck.
First, he took Miss Plover's loop and squat knee. She slid her stick to the edge of the map and tapped a loop there which was denoted by a white spiral. It had already been struck through with a foreboding chalk-marked X. Then, as we all witnessed a short time ago, he took Miss Cigarettes. Her stick slid to another loop, some distance across the city, which she crossed out with 2 swipes of her chalk. There are only 3 loops, beside our own still functioning in London, here, here, and here. Her stick went tap, tap, tap in a wide circle around the acre. "He'll take them within a day, I reckon," said Miss Peregrine. "At most, 2. She looked at Miss Cuckoo, who nodded grimly in reply. "He'll wait for a chink in our armor," Miss Blackbird said nervously, her third eye roving. "And when one appears, there will be none." Miss Cuckoo whacked the map so hard the tip of her chalk flew off, making Miss Blackbird jump. "Our shield will hold. The Panlupticorn in its powered-down state is impenetrable. Cole and his friends can surround us if they like, but they will be stalled at our gate. We will not be intimidated." "I don't know," I heard Enoch say. "Some people seem rather intimidated." Miss Peregrine stared daggers at him. "I asked you to be quiet, or shall I tell the guards to drag you off to the dungeon?" Enoch glared at the floor. "Speaking of Call's friends," Emma said from the back of the room, "what were those monstrous creatures he sent into Miss Egret's loop?" Miss Peregrine turned to scowl next at her. "It's all right, Alma," said Miss Avocet. "You children may as well come up to the table with the rest of us." "Really?" said Olive, her eyes going wide. "This is most irregular," said one of the Imbrans who'd recently flown in from elsewhere, who I later learned was Miss Waxwing. "We owe a great deal, not just to Mr. Portman, but to all of Alma's wards," said Miss Avocet. "They've earned the right to speak." Our friends came forward, beaming with pride, and stood beside us. "In answer to your question," Miss Avocet said, "we believe those creatures were high-ranking whites, or some monstrous corruption of their former selves at any rate. One of them, I swear it, was certainly Percival Murnau," said Miss Blackbird with a shiver. "The slime creature. I saw his face appear briefly in the muck." Miss Wren said, "Cole's giving the whites, the small number that remain, powers like his own. Not quite at the same level, but close, channeling the Library of Soul's energy into them somehow. Creating for himself an armor of lesser gods," said Miss Cuckoo. "My brother's no god," Miss Peregrine said acidly. "There will be more of them," said Miss Avocet. "They'll be his advance guard, his shock troops, along with this new breed of Hollowcast, if he's got any more hidden away. Even with all his power, he's too much of a coward to charge first across the line in battle." "Has anyone seen Call in person yet?" I asked. "Because I don't think he's showing us his real form. He had looked too normal in his projections. Nothing like the way he'd appeared in my dreams, or in the whirlwind in V's loop." Miss Merganser, the freelance Imbrin from Mozambique, who had been sitting quietly at the far end of the table, pushed back her chair and stood up. She had rusty red hair pulled tight against her head, shining dark skin, and looked younger than the rest of the Imbrans, hardly older than me or my friends. "One person has seen him," she said in a light, flat accent. "His name is Emmerich Daltwick. He's an escapee from the invasion of Miss Plover's loop early this morning." "Can we speak to him?" I asked. "He's here," the Imbrim replied. "I asked him to come and tell us what he saw. Shall I bring him in?" "By all means," said Miss Avocet. Miss Merganser signaled the guards at the door. They went out and came back with a short time later with a cowering boy. His face was covered with scratches, and his clothes were torn and dirty. Miss Peregrine got up from the conference table and went to examine him. "Why hasn't this young man been to seeing the bone mender?"
Raphael's full up with stampede injuries, said one of the guards.
This boy's been through hell. Make sure Raphael tends to him right away.
Yes, madam. Thank you, miss, the boy said meekly.
Go on, Emmerich. Please tell us what you saw this morning.
He began stammeringly, perhaps intimidated by the presence of so many powerful Imbrans.
We only need to hear about Cole, Miss Cuckoo interrupted. What did he look like? What did he do?
Ma'am, he was very big.
Yes, and what else?
The top half of him looked like a person, a man. But his bottom half was like a tree, like the trunk of a tree with roots going down into the ground for legs. But they wasn't made of wood. They was made of meat.
Of meat, Miss Avocet repeated.
Rotted meat. He squinched his nose. And everything he touched... He paused, went a bit pale. It died. He shivered, dropped his head. After he touched Lander's chocolate, Lander's turned green and black and rotted looking, and then he died.
By the elders, I heard Miss Blackbird whisper. Did he kill any others? Miss Peregrine asked.
Yeah, him and his people took some of my friends, stuffed them into a net, and dragged them off. The boy was shaking badly. Miss Avocet stood up from her chair with some difficulty, limped over to him, and draped her shawl around the boy's shoulders.
Get him to a bone mender, she told the guards. Thank you for coming to see us.
The boy nodded and started to leave with the guards, but at the door he turned back, eyes lit with fear. Cole can't get in here. Can he?
No, he can't, said Miss Cuckoo.
We won't let him in. After he'd gone and the door had closed, Bronwyn cried,
We've got to stage a rescue. Get those children back from him before he kills them all. No, we can't. We mustn't, said Miss Blackbird. It's just what Cole wants. He'll be lying in wait. I'm sure you're right. But it's our duty to try, said Miss Peregrine.
We'll assemble a rescue team, said Miss Cuckoo, nodding at Miss Avocet, who had been helped into her chair again by Francesca and was looking spent. Bronwyn's hand shot up.
I volunteer.
Miss Peregrine pushed her arm down gently.
That's very noble of you, dear, but we may need you for even more pressing things.
We've already sent orders to evacuate those 3 loops. Miss Cuckoo tapped the map again with her stick. Tap, tap, tap. But they can't come here. If we let down our shield to allow them inside, Cole could follow. So we've arranged for them to be secreted away in the night down the Thames, overnight on Felness Island, then proceed overland to a hideaway in Ballard's Gore. Why weren't they evacuated days? Why weren't they evacuated days ago? Said Miss Merganser.
We suggested it yesterday, but all refused to leave, said Miss Peregrine. They were worried about their loops would collapse in their absence. And, of course, Cole's sudden resurrection was a surprise to everyone.
I saw Nora's shoulders slump.
These are the go-down-with-the-ship types who would rather die than flee their loops, said Miss Peregrine. And will they?
Olive asked timidly.
Die? No, said Miss Cuckoo. If he kills them, he will only have dead children. Now he has hostages, which are much more useful. I agree, said Miss Peregrine. So long as Cole believes he can foment an insurrection in our ranks and undermine us from within, they'll be safe. So long as he's trying to win hearts and minds here in the acre, he won't kill those children. It would injure his case. And if he succeeds? Asked Taurus. Someone already tried to kill Jacob and Noor, Emma pointed out. That was mind control, said Miss Wren, reaching down to scratch Addison's head. We've since developed a backstop against that, 2 peculiars who can detect controlled minds and are constantly on watch. Addison's face popped up from under the table. Mistresses, if I may, Cole's poisonous rhetoric alone could never persuade anyone to betray you. Even the most disagreeable Loop Freedom agitator understands how much we owe you. Only a mad dog would prefer Cole's rules to yours. Miss Wren dug a morsel from her pocket and fed it to him. Thank you, Addison. Many have seen firsthand what White Rule would mean, Miss Blackbird added, and the degradation and depravity of Devil's Acre endured, slavery, drug addiction, violence, not to mention the wanton cruelty inflicted upon our loops during the raids a few months ago. Still, we shouldn't take people's loyalty for granted, said Miss Cuckoo, especially with co-lingering propaganda all over the acre. Then Emma finally said what we'd all been wondering. There's no truth to it, is there? What? That we offered a secret deal to the American leaders? It's ridiculous, Olive said. Emma, how could you even... It's partially true. Yes, said Miss Peregrine, and Olive stopped mid-sentence, her jaw hanging open. It was the only way we could get the Americans to sign the accord and avoid war. Loop freedom was the only incentive all 3 of them wanted. But, miss, said Olive, grasping for words. You told everyone it wasn't possible, that the loop reset reaction isn't safe yet. Miss Peregrine held up a hand to stop her. It isn't, though we may be close to a solution. That's why the Americans have been such a constant presence in the acre lately, said Miss Wren. They're waiting for their reset. They're in my office every other day, breathing down my bonnet about when it's going to be ready, Miss Avocet grumbled. But, Olive stammered, bottom lip trembling. How could you, when you wouldn't give it to anyone else, even Fiona? She was so upset she started floating, despite her lead boots, and Bronwyn had to reach for Olive's ankle and pull her down again before she drifted out of reach. Miss Peregrine looked wounded. Really, Olive, do you think so little of us? As soon as it's viable, which could be quite soon, we'll reset the leaders' clocks. But they want it only for themselves. Their expectation was that we would keep it a secret, even from their own American rank and file. Especially from them, said Miss Cuckoo. But that was never our intention, said Miss Peregrine. And now the call has let the secret slip. She spread her hands and smiled slyly. everyone will get reset? Emma asked. Everyone, said Miss Peregrine, including Fiona, naturally. As soon as it's ready, added Miss Avocet.
Olive nearly collapsed with relief.
Oh, thank goodness. I still worry, said Miss Blackbird timidly, that universal loot freedom would cause chaos. So many of our wards know nothing of the present. A few days ago, I was inclined to share your interest, said Miss Peregrine. But the situation has changed rather dramatically since then. Wouldn't you agree? Should we have to suddenly evacuate Devil's Acre?
Miss Cuckoo whacked her stick on the table.
Which we won't. Yes, but if we do, Miss Peregrine said patiently, our wards must be able to scatter into the great vast world and hide there for perhaps a long time. If they can only escape into loops for fear of aging, Cole will find them, and I would much rather see them lost in the present, even a present they were unprepared for, than killed or enslaved by my pitiless brother.
No one, it seemed, could argue with that.
Well, I think one of you better tell the crowd outside, said Horace. They're quite miffed.
There were shouts from the hall, the sounds of a scuffle, and before anyone in the room could react, the doors burst open. Lamothe came charging through with Parkins and several of their followers in tow. Leo's 4 goons pinned the home guard to the floor. I spun around, ready for a fight, and so did my friends, but the Americans stopped well short of us.
You spilled the beans, you lying harpies! Parkins shouted from his wheelchair and threw one of the crumpled papers on the floor.
Miss Peregrine stopped toward them and crossed her arms.
It wasn't us. We've no idea how Cole found out about our agreement. For all we know, it was one of your people who spilled the beans.
They didn't know a thing about it, Lamothe shouted.
If you think this changes anything, you're dead wrong, said Parkins. You're gonna stick to the terms of our deal. Gentlemen, Miss Avocet said with a tone of warning, you are free to have your clocks reset along with everybody else, or not at all.
Then the deal's off, Lamothe shouted. It was never gonna be ready. You've been stringing us along this whole time.
Actually, we're quite close to a breakthrough, said Miss Wren, echoing what Miss Peregrine had said earlier.
More lies, Parkins growled. Good luck fighting Cole without us, said Lamothe. We're taking our people and going home.
I'm not sure how you're going to get there, said Miss Peregrine. The Panlupticon is closed until further notice.
The raccoons rose, hissing from Lamothe's coat as his face deepened to purple. You're gonna open it for us, right now.
I suppose they could fly commercial, Miss Cuckoo said to Miss Peregrine, her tone conversational. How far is Heathrow Airport from here? 90 miles by cab.
Lamothe and Parkins were apoplectic, but they had nothing left to threaten the Embrons with. You've made a powerful enemy, Parkins said, spit flying from his lips. But their underlings looked confused and increasingly alarmed. A skinny cowboy in head-to-toe denim held up the crumpled paper and said, Boss, is it true you was gonna reset without us? Who told you to pick that up? Parkins snapped. Can I see that? A man in bearskins asked the man in denim. Quit reading things and break something, shouted Lamothe. The bearskin man dutifully kicked the legs off a small table.
That's quite enough of your temper tantrums, Miss Cuckoo shouted, and then 6 more home guards burst into the room and surrounded the Americans. See them out, please. And if they break anything or threaten anyone along the way, lock them in the jail. Get your damn hands off me, Parkins yelled, wrenching one away from the guards. I'm a-going. Come on, fellas. You ain't heard the last of us, Lamothe shouted as they were escorted out. Miss Peregrine shook her head. Such disappointing little men. As the American shouts echoed down the hall, I wondered how much worse off we'd be without them fighting by our side. I didn't get far with this train of thought, though, because no sooner had their voices disappeared than Perplexus's assistant, Matthew, ran into the room, breathless. Madams, he cried, we have news. He doubled over, panting. Before he could say what it was, Millard came charging in as well, his blue robe billowing behind him, rolled up maps under his arms. Perplexus has found a route, he announced. Fast, but very unpleasant. He will explain. And then history's most famous temporal cartographer rushed in behind him. Perplexus himself, muttering in Italian, arms piled high with still more maps. Salute, signore, he said, bowing to the Embrins. He was trailed closely by Francesca, who was trying to catch papers as they slipped out of his hands. The whole tower began to tip, and he reached the conference table just in time for them to topple across it. Mi scusi, Perplexus apologized, chasing the maps into a pile and giving me a perfunctory nod hello, though I couldn't see his eyes behind the little round sunglasses he always wore. Together, he and Millard unrolled a map of Europe that covered the Embrins' map of London. Miss Turner's Loop is the meeting place, we are quite sure, Perplexus said, switching to heavily accented English. He patted his pockets as he spoke, looking for something. It existed for 3 years only during the Great War, which is molto piccolo window of time in terms of leapfrogging, very difficult to find. Miss Turner's Loop collapsed over 100 years ago, Millard said. So in order to enter it, we must find a loop that existed contemporaneously with hers and which also survives to this day. But there are precious few left of that vintage. It was a terrible time for peculiars, Miss Peregrine explained, mostly for the benefit of Nora and me. The war was tearing apart Europe, and the Hollows had only begun hunting us in earnest a few years earlier. It took some time to understand what we were dealing with and how best to defend against it. Long tale short, said Millard, there are only 3 loops that might work. Do you need something? Miss Wren asked Perplexus, who was still searching for his pockets. I had a vial, he said, of espresso. A drop of sweat slid across his pale brow. Miss Avocet snapped her fingers. Someone get the man a strong coffee. A guard saluted her and dashed from the room. We were quite hoping to find a route that didn't involve crossing through any war zones, Millard continued, or very much of one. Our candidate is in Mongolia, Perplexus said, dabbling his face with the heavy black coat sleeve before using Miss Cuckoo's chalk stick to point at the map. Safe, as we discussed, but quite far away. It would require 2 weeks' travel to reach Miss Turner's Loop in France. Time we can't afford to take, said Miss Avocet. Perplexus slid the pointer southwest. The second is in the Adriatic Sea, 1918. Much closer. It had stopped on an island somewhere between Italy and Greece. But it's on a lazaretto, a quarantine island. Not only is it heavily guarded, but it's also infested with Spanish flu, said Millard. We can't risk you dying of sickness, and even if we could guarantee your safety in that regard, the journey would take 5 days, so on balance it isn't worth the risk. The guard returned, cradling a tiny cup in his hands. Espresso? He said, handing it to Perplexus, who drained it in 2 grateful gulps. Ah, he said, steam escaping his lips. When you're as old as I am, coffee is practically the only thing keeping you alive. And the 3rd loop? I said, an anxious clench building in my chest. Much closer, said Millard. Practically on top of Miss Turn's loop, only 10 miles away. But there's a catch, Nor guessed. Isn't there always? I muttered. Miss Turn's loop is on one side of the fighting, and this circa 1918 loop belonging to a Miss Hawksbill is on the other. He pointed to a loop in northern France. A sea route is out of the question. It's blocked by warships patrolled by submarines and would take too long. Anyway, the best route is overland straight across the front lines. One of the worst hells the 20th century ever made. There was a pause, and after a few seconds, Nora realized the room was looking at her. She stiffened. What? I haven't changed my mind. Enoch leaned toward her. It's trench warfare. Bullets, bombs, gas, disease. You'd need a miracle to survive that. She looked at him like he was a little slow. Then we'll have to arrange for one. She turned to the Embrins. It's not like there's a choice, right? The Embrins shook their heads. I was sure then that I wanted to know Nur Pradesh for the rest of my life, however short or long that turned out to be. And then a new thought entered my mind, and a cold wave of dread brushed my heart. I want to talk to you in private, I said. There's nothing to talk about, she said, but I persuaded her to step away from the table with me anyway. You don't have to do this, I whispered. No, you don't. But I do. I let that monster out. You didn't. We're not going to argue this again. I'm the only one here who can send Cole back where he came from. There's no choice. Not for me, anyway. If it kills me, it kills me. But you don't have to come. In fact, I'd rather you lived. I did this. It's my fight. The idea of letting her do this alone, the mere thought, filled me with physical revulsion. There's no way you're going without me. Or me, Bronwyn said, stepping toward us. Emma joined her side. Or me. It's too dangerous, Nor said. You guys don't have to. You won't get 500 feet without my map knowledge, said Millard, his blue robe swishing around the table toward us. It's my route, and I should be there to help you navigate it. Addison left his place by Miss Wren's side and marched solemnly over to us. I lived in a menagerie loop most of my life. If anyone can help you negotiate Miss Turn's loop, it's me. Enoch sighed testily and said, I'm not about to be left here twisting in the wind. I'll be so bored. Well, if you're all going, Olive began, but so many of us shouted, no, in unison, that she didn't even finish her sentence. She looked hurt. Sorry, Olive, said Emma. Big kids only. The Embrins were looking at us with odd expressions, a mix of pride and fear. Miss Peregrine looked proudest of all. but she'd gone white as a bedsheet. "Alma, do you approve of this?" asked Miss Avocet. In reply, she only nodded. And that is the end of chapter 12. Wasn't that a fun time? Why are there 12 old ladies? There are 2 ladies that aren't old in this room. One of them was never in any of the books before and has no description, isn't even on the wiki page for the book series. And the other one's fucking French. Do you want me to die? Some French person's gonna be pissed. Anyway, I hope you all enjoyed that. I had a good time. I like reading to you all. I like reading in general, and it is super cool that people want to sit here and let me read to them. It's my childhood dream come true. So thank you all, each week, for letting me fulfill my childhood dream of reading to people who actually want to listen to me. So that's always super nice. And to reward you all for sitting through me doing a bad French accent for 45 minutes, we get cat facts. Isn't that nice? Don't you all want cat facts? And we got a real good one today. Thank you, Toby. Everybody say hi to Toby. Tell Toby he's a good boy. And we're gonna be doing a real fun cat today. Everybody's gonna have a great time. It's the Norwegian forest cat, who, everybody sound off. Norwegian forest cats are some of my favorite breeds of cats. They're so gorgeous. All of them are so gorgeous. You can't tell me you don't love a Norwegian forest cat. Anyway. From the small munchkin to the big kahuna, the Norwegian forest cat is similar in size to the slightly larger Maine Coon cat. Males range up to 20 pounds or more, and overall the species has a slightly longer lifespan than the Maine Coon. These large cats also have lush, dense fur that helps keep water out and insulates them from the cold in their native Norway. Norwegian forest cats are a naturally occurring breed, meaning someone discovered one someday and had it certified as a breed. They come in almost all colors, often with fluffy jowls, lynx tip ears, and bright eyes that give them the overall look of a more wild cat. Their paws are big and generously padded, with their tufts between the pads. Norwegian forest cats also have a fluffy bib in front and fluffy breeches in back. Because it's so large, the Norwegian forest cat doesn't fully mature into an adult cat until as late as 5 years old. Surprisingly, the Cat Fanciers Association awards the most points to the Norwegian forest cat's head shape and qualities, including a distinctive profile with no break, meaning the forehead slopes smoothly into the nose without a bend or dip where the bridge of the nose would be. The next most valuable qualities are judged from their body shape and features. Norwegian forest cats evolved to hunt and fish outdoors in the extreme cold. And here's a little boy. Little guy. Look at that little guy. Look at that big guy. He's so fluffy looking. Oh, look at him. They're so fluffy. If there's one thing I ever really get excited about, it's a great cat. And all cats are great, so I get excited about every cat. And I would like to thank everybody who regularly sends me cat videos. You know I love those. And if you've never seen a Norwegian forest cat, I'll just show you Spike. He's close enough. He might even be part Norwegian forest cat. We don't know what he is. He's large, and he does have all of those qualities. So, I don't know where Spike is. I'd say I'd go get him. I have no idea where he is.
I included a size comparison this time versus you. So large. And I like a good fluffy cat. I like a big fluffy cat. I like all cats. I don't know what I'm saying. I like tiny short-haired cats, and I like big floofy cats. I like all the cats, but the fluffier, the better, in my opinion. The closer they are to just being a pillow, the best cat. You can use Pond as a pillow. She enjoys being used as a pillow. Spike, I have not tried. Normally, because I feel he's just kind of dumb. He's probably the dumbest animal in the house. He's even dumber than Scout sometimes. He's an orange boy, so he has one singular brain cell, and only on Tuesdays. Which happens to be the only day you'll ever get to see him. So he's the only day where he actually appears to be smart sometimes. Every other day, me and Dave watched him try and jump. The thing is, I've seen him jump several feet in the air flawlessly. He tried to jump onto a chair that was less than a foot off the ground the other day, and then just gave up halfway through the jump, and he only landed on the chair with his front torso, and didn't even look like startled or surprised. He just looked like, you know, the cat that's like, Mondays, am I right? Like, looked like that, like he just gave up, and he just looked at us and he was like, okay, well, this is as far as the jump goes. And me and Dave were just losing it, because he didn't even look like he didn't even try to get back up on the chair. He just kind of hung there for a second and was like, well, not making it today, and then let go. Once again, he can jump several feet in the air. He's great at jumping. I don't know why this happened. It was so weird. The cat's weird. I've seen him jump on the bed, and I've seen him jump on high counters. He's jumped on the bird cage. They can't get into the bird cage. They just like to jump on the shelf outside of the bird cage. And they like to sleep on top of the bird cage. But I've seen him jump all the way up there. Not the chair. He just gave up. That dumbass just stopped trying. It was so funny. I wish y'all could have been there. I wish I got it on film. I never catch it when they do stupid shit. I wish they had like a warning. If there was like a real life like signal that would go off that's like, yo, your cat's about to do something whack as shit, I would be there with the camera every single time. But it never works out that way. They always do it when it's inconveniently not the right time. I'm in the middle of something, and I'm like boiling water, and then they do something dumb, and I'm like, oh God, why'd it have to be while I was in the middle of something? I'm never just hanging out when they do something dumb. Anyway, that's my struggle. Yeah, it's always like in another room, or like I left it on the table, and then my cat does something buck wild and crazy, and I'm like, man, bruh, why can't you ever do that when my phone is in my pocket? I could have whipped it out real fast. Like, you couldn't have not. Anyway. Never works out that way. Oh well, that's my struggle as a cat owner. Anyway, thank you all for hanging out with me and listening to me read, and I will see you all same time next week, unless I die, and we'll read the same book. That was Minty. Sorry, I didn't know what that was. That was a weird noise. I don't even know what she's doing, in all honesty. It sounded like plastic. It's gone now. If I find out one of them ate plastic, I'm going to be real mad. Anyway, but we're going to be reading the rest and some more of Desolations of Devil's Acre. Once again, if you don't know where we're at, you can look it up on the YouTube. The YouTube is up to date. I will probably update the YouTube again with this live sometime tomorrow. If you want to check out the book and haven't, it's by Ransom Riggs. It's a really great series, and I encourage you all to go invest in it. If for nothing else, the pictures alone. They look great. You can always re-listen to me read it to you, but the picture's phenomenal. And I know I don't have great resolution on here, and the lighting is super whack because I can't turn on the ring light today because I have glasses on. So I'm sorry if the pictures weren't as great of a quality as they normally are. And for the rest of the evening, I will be going live on Discord and streaming some more Graveyard Keeper. I need to reinvest in a microphone now, unfortunately. So it'll be maybe less of an audio quality than we're all used to, but we're still going to keep on trucking. And I hope to see you all there. Thank you. Anyway, and I will see you all next week where we'll pick back up where we left off. Thanks, guys.